All right, y'all. It's Christian Backman, and this is my 422 response to No Zombies Allowed by Greg Michie. All right, so the first quote that I found interesting was when he was talking to his students on the first day of class, just introducing the course material, what the class was going to be like. He said, "Don't turn your brain off when you turn the TV on." I thought that was interesting because I so often have used TV as a way to relax from a hard, busy day, um, or just to veg out or whatever and just not think at all, which is not what I should be doing at all. Because when you think about all the different influences that go into the creation of what you're watching, you really understand that there are all sorts of forces at play, all sorts of background and different information coming from the directors, the actors, that you really need to be paying attention to as much as possible. It makes it a way more meaningful experience, I think. And I think it's also incredibly important because, it's a great habit building exercise, especially if you start with the young kids and you get them to think critically about what they watch. Then that transfers to just every other thing in their life. I remember hearing we talked about different lenses that we could view the world with. And this was in my theater class actually last semester, and it talked about the importance of analyzing everything. Don't take anything for granted. Don't let anybody just tell you something. Know why it exists. Know why, and the reasons behind its creation, its inception. So I always thought that was interesting. One of the lenses that we looked at was called the Brechtian lens, named after Bertolt Brecht, who was a really influential theater. Basically, started his own theater movement, and it revolved around the alienation effect, which was another thing that Greg Michie actually used when he asked the kids. I believe they were discussing the 13-year-old prostitute episode of Jerry Springer, and he talked to them and told them to imagine that they were aliens and that they were just looking at us, and all the information they had essentially was just that Jerry Springer show and what went on in it and what they would think. So that's kind of what Brecht did with his theater. No 13-year-old prostitutes, but what he did do was take the audience away from the fact that they were watching a performance. One of the ways he would do this was he would have the actors, just be doing their dialogues or monologues. Just talking to each other, essentially, talking about the play's subject matter, and then just out of nowhere turn to the audience and start addressing, some random person in the audience like they were in the play. And so what that does is that, disconnects you from what you're watching and makes you think, makes you internalize, what if this was happening to me? This person's talking to me. What do I actually think? What would I actually do? So I thought that was really interesting and just something that this quote reminded me of from one of my other classes that I took that I really enjoyed. The next quote I wanted to talk about was when he was talking about a media literacy course that uses the programs kids watch as tech study. I thought that was really interesting too. I think we should do that more as teachers. I discussed this in one of my other 422s where I essentially just said I think that we should let kids choose what they want to learn about more. I think as far as me becoming a health and a PE teacher, for instance, we have the concept of a pre-selected task constraint, which I won't get into the details of that. But essentially what it means is that you can either have a pre-selected or a constrained selection of what you want to learn. And what you would do with a constrained would be you as a teacher would develop a plan, say, this is how I want you to learn this thing. Well, with pre-selected, you get to choose what you want to learn, and you get to start to choose how you want to learn it. And what that does essentially is the the kid internalizes it better because he chose it. He chose what he wanted to do. So he is going to do it to the best of his abilities rather than listening to what someone has to say. This is really effective, especially in adolescence, because that's kind of the time of change and when kids are going through such huge foundational shifts in their life, and they're just kind of more rebellious. So that's what that reminded me of. Thought it was super interesting. Also, the characters in cartoons, or I mean, whatever kids are watching, they're usually more in tune with pop culture. I'm just saying for the majority of kids, they consume, they see pop culture displayed in advertisements of the programs they're watching because advertising agencies and companies choose those programs because they know that kids are watching them anyway. That is going to show them if they can think through what they're watching with a critical lens, deconstruct things like what Michie is saying, then they can better understand them and and really understand what's going on around them, really understand what's actually happening in their culture. The third quote that I wanted to talk about was kind of a sad quote nearing the end of, I believe, the chapter or something like that. Anyway, it's just Michie talking. He says, "It's a teachable moment that got away. Just one of the many that I've knowingly let slip through my fingers." Talking about Frankie. This just struck me because there's so many teaching moments that we let slip through our fingers daily. Whether you're just talking to a friend, someone who's your age, a peer, or you have a chance to say something in class, but you decide not to say it, or just whatever. I think about those moments where I could have said something to some of the students that I've had with basketball training camps and stuff, and through helping out with my youth group. And I think, I never want to miss another moment again. That quote just kind of brought that idea back to me. It's so important to use, every bit of our time, listening and teaching as best as we can. That really connected with me. The fourth quote that I wanted to talk about with you guys was not from Greg Michie, but was from an incredible philosopher going by the name of Coolio, the rapper, and it goes something like this. "They say I got to learn, but nobody's here to teach me. If they can't understand it, how can they reach me? I guess they can't, I guess they won't, I guess they front. That's why I know my life is out of luck, fool." Yep, I did that. Coolio. He brings up something really important here, if we don't connect with kids, if we don't try to connect with kids where they're at, then we're really not going to get them to reach their full potential. We have to. I think it's really important that we as teachers have to at least try to understand where they are. Maybe even try to start with where they are a little bit more. I remember in school just feeling like you had to, I don't know. You have to have you have to already be at a certain starting place, and not having, not feeling like my teachers were really connecting with me on that level. So I think it's important that we try to do that more, even though it's, really, really complicated and way harder than it actually, sounds. It sounds easy to just be like, oh yeah, I'll just be, I'll understand my kids, or I'll be friends with my kids. But a teacher-student relationship is really complex too. So anyway, I thought that was interesting. So a couple questions I was wondering about was, since I'm a health and PE major, how can I, as a PE teacher and health teacher, find ways in which kids could examine the media they consume and deconstruct it with a critical lens? So I was just kind of struggling to think about how could I use a little bit of media literacy tactics, maybe, Some of the stuff he did, like what programs, for instance, I could have kids watch that wouldn't be, like gross stuff on whatever health, but something that would actually connect with them and that they would be willing to watch, like he was saying, with the programs as tech studies, stuff that they actually watch, and how could I get them, to think about them in ways that would build better health, healthy habits, and maybe even get them interested in more physical activity. The second question I wanted to know is if you guys, I was just curious about how you guys might want to use like critical deconstruction, like as he talks about, as a teaching tool. Like what media you guys would have your kids deconstruct, what differences in opinion you have to mine. Yeah, anything like that. I would really appreciate hearing in your responses. So a couple things from my life. I like I said before, I've let so many teaching moments escape me already in the little amount of teaching experience that I've had. Um, and often I've realized that these are because I'm just, I'm content, and that's really not something I think is good. That feeling, I always want to be trying to be better, and I think that's really important that we do that as teachers. Also, another thing I thought of when I was reading the article was that I felt like a lot of times in high school that we weren't listening enough. So this goes along again with Greg Michie's relationship with Frankie. I don't know if he listened enough. Maybe we don't. Maybe we don't do that enough as teachers. And I know a lot of my high school teachers didn't seem to want to listen to what I had to say unless it was about an assignment. And anyway, I don't want to be that kind of teacher. I want to be someone who actually listens to what my kids have to say and helps them try to problem solve the best way that I possibly can. But yeah, thank you guys for listening. Again, this is Christian Backman, and respond, please. Bye.